Should everyone do some form of fasting?
No,
Could too much comfort actually be harming our health?
definitely.
Is stress the biggest hidden driver of chronic illness today?
No, because people should define stress.
Can temporary stress like cold and heat exposure trigger some anti-aging processes?
Obvious.
Okay. Obviously, yeah. Okay. Can short bouts of intense exercise mimic ancient survival challenges?
Yes, if you do it in a functional way.
Okay. We're going to get to that. And finally, is being in nature medicinal?
It is a basic necessity.
Look, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. I wanted to start with something that I heard you say, or perhaps it was something you read actually. You can take a human out of being in nature, but you can't take nature out of the human being. Can we expand on that?
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the most important human characteristics. Obviously, culture has become our way of living, which is not at all some reaction on nature. It is the natural consequence of nature. And you can imagine that the number of mortal factors in nature were so high that we had to develop our intelligence to get out of it. So we got out of it. Yeah? And human beings haven't done so. Industrial revolution, the first, the second, and third, they're not bad. That are not bad inventions. The thing is, we did not know about the consequences. Yeah, I love the fact that there are airplanes. You're here, and I'm here because there are airplanes. But we didn't know that all those nanoparticles could be that toxic. I definitely know that if we would have known what Homo digitalis is suffering at the level of fertility, I definitely know we would never ever have invented computers. But we didn't know, yeah? So we just did it, and it provided an enormous amount of advances, but the consequences at this moment are huge. We really have too much culture.
Yeah.
So we got out of nature, but luckily enough, we never can get rid of nature, which is inside us.
Yeah. It reminds me of this quote I've been reflecting on quite a bit recently. I can't remember who coined it, but it's something along the lines of, there are no solutions, only trade-offs.
Yeah. Yeah, and you shouldn't feel sorry if there's no solution. And if there's a solution, you shouldn't feel sorry, which is more or less in the same line. That means that we are constantly giving and taking. Yeah? So energy distribution, which is the most important mechanism every living plant or organism is facing, is always above anything else. So it means that you cannot have this brain we have, use it as we use it, and at the same time be very fertile. That's impossible because it's too much energy. And today we invert an enormous amount of energy in our cognitive capacities or skills or tools, and that means that we are losing fertility, which perhaps after menopause is not a problem, because women after menopause, you know what they should do? Learn a new language with a computer. That's the best thing they can do. That increases their life expectancy, but really increases their life expectancy. But if you're young, if you want to have a kid, don't engage the whole day in digital work, because it affects fertility because of an energy distribution conflict.
Is that because we're utilizing too much energy in engaging with devices, utilizing our brain, utilizing other elements of our physiology that are directing away from things like metabolism?
Look, if you look at Homo digitalis, which is really an anthropology, an existing species already, then you see those people that learn online, they learn online. That's not the same as gathering information. When they learn online, that's brain stress. But it's a very healthy brain stress. What you see is an increase of the hippocampus, but you really see in volume and in neuronal number, you see a huge amount of new connections, which is incredible. But at the same time, that brain releases some packages, extra cellular vesicles, and they travel to our germline, which we never thought that was possible. And the germline, our gametes, the oocytes and the spermatozoids, the wise man barrier, that doesn't exist anymore. This guy won the Nobel Prize because he said that oocytes and spermatozoids are impermeable. It's not true at all. There's a constant communication between the soma, of which the brain is the most important part, and the germline. And so that investment in brain learning processes, which we have never done that much than the last 2 generations, is really informing spermatozoids and oocytes. And if you then look to the way the epigenetics, so the way those cells start to function, you will be very, very surprised. Spermatozoids dying because of neurological activity. But the thing is, which is incredible, but also already evidenced, that if the spermatozoids become really in danger, which means no spermatozoids that would be surviving, then spermatozoids, they can travel to the brain, convert themselves in a neuron, and affect our brain. So if you look at it, it sounds like science fiction, but this is really happening in the human body. Yeah? If we would have known that, that's what I said, if we would have known it, we would never have invented all those things we have invented, because we never knew the consequences once again.
I feel like we could have a full conversation all about the decline in fertility and the various mechanisms behind that. I want to talk about the paper that I found absolutely fascinating, and it's called Intermittent Living, the use of ancient challenges as a vaccine against the deleterious effects of modern life. And from my reading of this, it's around how our modern lives are more comfortable than ever. We have food on demand. We have heating at the touch of a button. We don't need to experience the hardships of our natural environment anymore. Yet we're seeing rising rates of things like chronic fatigue, anxiety, metabolic diseases. I wonder if you can expand a bit more about this term intermittent living and how this relates to this paradoxical picture that we have today.
Look, two main sciences, so disciplines, they are bankrupt, which is psychiatry and psychology. If you look to all the statistics about depression, the number of people suffering from depression is constantly increasing. If we look at the number of suicides, so if people suffer depression and our interventions would be okay, the number of suicides should decrease. Not happening. number of depressions is increasing, number of suicides is increasing, and at the same time, the amount of money we're spending in all the medicines to treat people with the depression, they have increased exponentially. So something is wrong. Something is wrong with the way we look at health and the way we look at mental and physical health. Okay? So where does this come from, this intermittent living thinking? It comes from the fact that when I studied anthropology, cultural anthropology, then my teacher was a white woman who lived with white people in Africa, and she thought that she knew about evolution. I said, how can you say that you know about evolution? You lived with white people in Africa. You only have seen how white people live there. We have to understand where longevity and health come from. And if we look at our ancestors, and if we look at the way they achieved things, it was always based on 4 characteristics. Okay? And those 4 characteristics end up with a mindset. And mindset, now gradually people start to believe, which has last a long time, how emotions, how the way we think affects our health. Okay, so the last word is mindset. So if you look at our ancestors, if they were in need, they were hungry or thirsty, or they were cold or hot, or they had a wound, then they had to do something to solve that problem. They had to move, exercise.
Yeah.
Okay, and that took time. If you look at our ancestors, normally it took them in between 3 and 6 hours to hunt or to gather. Yeah? Then it took them more or less 3 to 6 hours to prepare the food, which is 12 hours. And then they ate. Yeah? So there was a huge time lock between their hunger and the reward. So it was about an effort, it was about time, and they had to take risks. And that were huge risks. There were lions, there was everything, and there were co-species who was hunting or gathering the same food. And then they achieved their reward. And that produced something which is the most important mindset to gain, let's say, to gain or to win, or the best way is you have to deserve health. So can you imagine that when you then find your food and you have done everything you've done and you took your risks, then the feeling is I deserve this. And health you have to deserve. That is not for free. And we think in our cultural, comfortable life that longevity in the blue zones is based on comfort. Longevity in the blue zones is based on very hard work. Very hard work. They move at least 6 to 8 hours a day. And they're always taking care of the family. That's an effort. And they have to take risk. And they deserve it. And that feeling of deserve it, that's a mindset which activates the reward system in the brain. And if you want to know, we could discuss it a little bit later, but that part of the brain is responsible for which immune response you are going to mount in which contextual situation.
So just to relate that back, these 4 characteristics, you mentioned hunger.
So now I mentioned effort.
Oh, effort. Sorry. Yeah.
Time, risk, and mindset.
Okay. And these are the outcomes of some of the stressors of their lifestyles, i.e., the hunger, the thirst,
Basic needs.
basic needs. Yeah.
Thirst.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have ever been in with hunter gatherers. I've been, but the Yanomami Indian and the Tsimane Indian in South America, although perhaps they live aside a river, they can't drink that water because that water is completely polluted with the feces of wild animals. So they have to find water, and it's incredible that they know that there are only two tree types in which you can drink the water, because all the other trees, if you drink their water, you die, and they know those trees. That's incredible, and so they drink that water. So that's if you think of that, say, wow, that's philosophy, that is wisdom. That is not information on a computer. That is knowing about life. Okay, so if you see what they do, then it is not effortless. Yeah, and that is something. We have the weirdest reward system of every single animal.
Okay.
Our reward system functions really different. We cannot. I do a lot of comparative physiology.
Okay.
So I investigate brown bears, elephants, and see why they don't get certain diseases in their natural habitat. They also have a thing which is called species-specific stress exposure.
Okay.
You understand? Every species
I don't know what that is.
needs its own stress exposure.
Okay.
So can you imagine brown and black bears in Canada? If they live there, they cannot develop cardiovascular diseases. It's impossible. And you say, how come? Obviously, deterministic genetic thinkers start to search for a gene. That is, with all respect, has got nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Although they would find a gene that would never explain why they don't develop cardiovascular disease. But they can't.
For the listener, can you just define deterministic genes for them?
Yeah, so deterministic genes is people thinking that the blueprint of life are genes. They always search for a genetic answer. Yeah, that's genetic deterministic thinking. I don't think like that.
Okay.
So those brown and black bears in Canada, they have to survive the winter. And so there are 3 months in which they live in a torpor, in overwintering. So that's very cold, and they have to down-regulate their metabolism. And then in those 3-4 months, their body temperature is perhaps 31 degrees Celsius.
31 degrees Celsius. Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know, but if you overwinter, if those animals invernate, they don't sleep. People think they are sleeping. They're not sleeping. They're awake, with a very low metabolism.
Okay.
And they wake up every day to sleep for 8 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize.
No, nobody knows that.
I literally thought that
everybody
just
thinks they are sleeping all the time. They can't. No, that's impossible.
Okay.
They would die. So they are in torpor. So they decrease their metabolic activity.
Okay.
That's what that is almost magical how those animals do that. And when you then see what happens with the brain of those animals during those 3 months, it really gets atrophic. But then they come out of the torpor, out of the sleeping period, and in 24 hours, their brain is completely normal again.
After 24 hours?
Yeah, and that is what we should investigate. I'll explain you how important this is.
Yeah.
Okay? So they come out of it, and that's their species-specific stress exposure factor. Very cold winter. That's what they need.
And that's why they don't get cardiovascular
And that's why they
disease.
don't get it. Because you take them to a zoo in Los Angeles, and they get atherosclerotic changes, although they eat fish, because we know what those animals eat in the wild. But we don't understand that stress exposure is incredibly important for us.
That's actually a very good point, and I want to highlight that for the listener actually, because you're taking the same bear that does not experience cardiovascular disease, putting it into a different environment where the cardiovascular disease is expressed phenotypically, so they actually see that in their physical in their physicality. So it can't be a genetic thing. They can't have engineered their evolution. They kind of evolved to not have cardiovascular disease because they experience cardiovascular disease in the right environment.
Exactly. So it's a 100% contextual thing. The context changes, and the text is not capable to adapt to that new context.
Gotcha.
And that's very important.
Yeah.
So we are living in a new context.
Yeah.
In a cultural context, and it's incredibly difficult to adapt. And if we want to wait for some bottleneck, then we can wait for a long time. You know why? Because modern life is toxic, but it doesn't kill little children, and it doesn't kill pregnant women, because that would produce a bottleneck, and that would produce perhaps the death of 7 billion people. But it's not going to happen, because all those danger factors we're living in, they make us ill. But because of the fact that we have an incredible advanced acute medical system, we survive. And because of the fact that we survive, there's not going to be a genetic polymorphism or a thing that said, oh, you can achieve, you call that non-fragility in this context. Forget it. But that does not mean that there is not a possibility to adapt, which is called turbo-adaptive capacity.
Turbo-adaptive capacity.
That means that's very speedy.
Yeah.
So I don't want my kids to be ill. I want them to adapt to this environment today.
Okay.
And I'm not going to wait for some gene that would give me some advantage. That advantage we can achieve ourselves.
Okay. And I'm just thinking back to those characteristics that we were talking about earlier: effort, time,
risk.
Risk. I'm just struggling to think of days where I've done any of those, really. I mean, like, apart from cooking, but because everything is so convenient these days, even the red lentils that require soaking only need about 15 to 20 minutes, because they've already been hulled, they've already been taken from their legume structure. Like,
and
so much of
pre-cooked.
so much of that stuff has been done for us. So we live in a very sort of luxurious period where we don't need to invest the time even to do the most basic of things like cooking.
I'm going to answer or say something about what you said, but I look, it's a risk taking.
Yeah.
People who suffer the fear of death, which you called the fear of terror, you can only get them from that focus. You know how? By doing all kind of dangerous things. Humpty jumping. Do weird things with those people, and the fear again for death disappears. Literally disappears, because this is so human. People taking risk are much more happier than people not taking risk at all. It's really about happiness, about mindset.
Yeah.
But if I come back to what you said, could you repeat the last sentence?
I was just thinking about how little time
Yeah.
I actually invest in the most basic things.
Look, a lot of people think that health. Yeah, they say, I don't understand why I get cancer. Look, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I eat organic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I should not have cancer.
Yeah.
And then I said, that are 3 things out of 25 domains.
Okay.
So don't think that eating organic, not drinking and not smoking, there you're going to win the Olympic Games. Forget it. Then when you're 50 years old, you can have cancer like anybody else. Because that's what you say. Okay, I don't smoke. Then you don't have to buy it either. Yeah. So perhaps you investing a little bit of money would be better for you, because that's nice stress. Okay, then you don't drink. Ooh, I don't know if that's always the good thing to do, not drinking a glass of wine in a social situation.
For the psychological
and
benefits.
eat organic food, definitely. But one moment, how did you get that food? It was brought, or you went with the car. And how do you drink? No, I have a water bottle next to me. And how is your sex life? And how's your sleeping? And do you chant? And are you spiritual? And do you socialize? And so if I would finish, there are 25 domains, which all are basic needs for human beings. Competing, playing. Competing is so healthy for people. It's so mythological, not true, that they think that we should not compete. That is so incredible human to compete. It's normal, but not to kill anybody. No, just to become better.
Yeah.
And that is our reward system. So we need those challenges.
Yeah.
And if we afterwards going to talk, for instance, about hypoxia and the use of breathing exercises, it's an incredible game to do apnea in a group and see who holds the longest. And then you're going to measure afterwards the cortisol level and the noradrenaline level and the immunological cytokines. And you fall from your chair. You say, wow, the person who won has the lowest cortisol level.
Oh, really?
And then you said, what the hell is this? How can this be? You understand?
Yeah.
But the testosterone comes out of his ears or her ears. So you really can influence everything in your body. And that is so important, that people have to understand that hormones and cytokines, they are not in charge. Genes are not in charge. We are in charge. We are an organism, and we determine how our organs function, how our system functions, how our organelles function, and the organelles are not in charge. We are in charge. And so I always ask people, look, evolution gave us an incredible brain, but why don't we use it in our benefit? You understand? That is what we should ask everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that exercise is necessary. We don't. Everybody knows we shouldn't eat that much. We do. Everybody knows that sitting time is very toxic. And what do? We sit on our gluteus maximus for 8 hours a day, and nobody feels, and that's very important, the need to stand up. I think and that's something which is very important. We don't feel the need to stand up. We don't feel the need to gather food. We don't feel the need to stop breathing. We don't. You understand? So we don't feel it.
Yeah.
So we that's why we don't do it. There is not something like a symptom that would make us do breathing exercises. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
It would be fantastic that people stand up from their chair every half an hour, because sitting produces a symptom. It doesn't produce a symptom. Yeah. That's weird, eh?
I love that idea that there isn't this innate drive to do something that is very natural for humans, in the same way, if you were to hold your breath, there is the innate desire to take a breath, to breathe. You know, we do have these mechanisms in our brain that get us to do certain things, but in terms of going out today and experiencing stress intentionally, we're sort of always defaulting to the easiest option. And again, I've always thought about that through the evolutionary lens. Is that an evolutionary advantage for us? The fact that we are seeking comfort?
Of course. What we did with that is diminish acute mortal factors. Okay, look, the brain is robust, but at the same time it's flexible. All our systems are robust systems, but at the same time very flexible. If that wouldn't be like this, it would be very weird. But you can imagine that the highest achievement whatever animal could achieve is having everything in a hedonic way without any effort.
Yeah.
This is completely normal. Obese people who don't engage in exercise and eat 20 times a day, they are the normalest people in the whole world. We are weird people. We are crazy. People look at me, that guy is crazy. Yeah? He stands up and starts to do push-ups. But why does he do? We are comfortable. Why should we do that? That's it.
Yeah.
You should do it. But it's something you have to. You have in our environment. You have to choose for.
Yeah.
It will not happen spontaneously. With one exception. Afterwards, I'm going to explain you the exception.
Okay. All right. Fine. Well, I love that point about us trying to experience hedonism in the most comfortable way possible.
Yes.
And how I guess like we're all experiencing this incredible point in our evolution where we have so much accessible to us that we have to engineer our lives to be slightly more stressful for our health benefit. And I don't think we've ever experienced that along our timeline. So this is where I think this idea, bringing it back to intermittent living, is so important. And I was going to start off with some of these ancient triggers with health benefits, starting with fasting. But because you've mentioned hypercapnia, I think, why don't we start there? So what is hypercapnia? And why would we have experienced that evolutionarily, and what potential advantages are there for us?
You probably can imagine if we climb over the Caucasus mountain, we're going to suffer hypoxia, definitely, yeah? Because the oxygen pressure is perhaps 11% and not 21 like
11%.
11%.
Wow.
Yeah. And then so you hardly have any oxygen.
Yeah.
And you're going to produce an enormous amount of CO2. Yeah. Which is an incredible stress factor.
Yeah.
Both of them. It's very interesting. We do not have oxygen receptors on every cell, but we have CO2 receptors on every cell. Yeah. So CO2 fluctuation, down and up, is something which is sensed by every single organ and cell. And it produces an increase of blood flow. If it's CO2 high, hypercapnia. No? If you look at the immune system, all immune cells have CO2 receptors. And high level of CO2 eases the immune system. Yeah? But it does even do something else. It helps you, if you train this, and you have to repeat the training because otherwise it doesn't work, then you gradually stop being panic sensitive. Because CO2 is a panicogen. It is the system, the substance producing panic attacks, producing anxiety, No, anxiety is not true. Panic attacks. Yeah. Because it's in the brainstem, and panic attacks is a consequence of direct danger in time and in distance. Now we have 3 types of fear. We have panic, fear, and anxiety. Every type of fear is localized in another part of the brain. The brain stem is panic, the limbic system is fear, and the prefrontal cortex is an anxiety. But they are all the 3 of them are based on evolutionary development of first reptiles, and then mammals, and then human beings. Completely normal. So CO2, carbon dioxide, makes people incredible panic resistant.
Okay.
And can you imagine how that works? For instance, in deep sea divers, or in Olympic swimmers. You cannot imagine Olympic swimmers. I have trained several Olympic swimmers in the last Olympic Games, and they trained hypercapnia every day, 4 times a day, 20 minutes. You can imagine with a plastic bag.
20 minutes.
Yeah,
so no breathing for 20
they
minutes.
breathe 1.5 minute in the plastic bag.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which means they inspire CO2.
Yeah.
30 seconds pause, 1.5 minutes, 30 seconds, 1.5 minute, 30 seconds, 20 minutes in a row, 4 times a day.
Wow.
And their resistance, their anti-fragility, so increased enormously. But it is dose dependent.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not, I'm going to do 2 minutes of hypercapnia training and I will win the Olympic Games. Forget it.
Yeah.
You have to challenge yourself. And the feelings of the feeling it produces is a feeling of power. Yeah, a feeling, nothing can hurt me anymore. That are really the feelings people say. When we do those things, that produces a feeling of being in charge.
Yeah. Have these techniques ever been used outside of like really motivated individuals like Olympic swimmers, and used in a population of folks who are suffering generalized anxiety disorder or panic attacks to good effect?
Very, very much. And COVID-19 was very interesting, because COVID-19 people didn't know, but nurses and doctors in the beginning of COVID-19 we were all in panic.
Yeah.
So how were people treated? Like they had as if they had tuberculosis. Yeah. So with a mask, with a closed mask.
Yeah.
So what were they doing? Hypercapnia. And they didn't know that they were doing hypercapnia. And those experiences they have been published.
Yeah.
In Nature and Science. And people say, it was so weird.
Yeah.
We didn't know what happened. But afterwards we understood we were doing hypercapnia. And what they really were doing is therapeutic hypercapnia. As if it was, so they became through hypercapnia more protected against the virus. So that is something. So you use a breathing exercise that produces a thing which is called biological amplification, and it protects you against pathogens. Fantastic. It's so easy. It's the most easiest way to protect yourself against pathogens. Doing breathing exercises.
Are these all sorts of breathing exercises, or I'm assuming there's a bit of a smorgasbord of different types of training that you can do.
Yeah.
Hyperoxygenation, breath holding, certain types of methods where you do box breathing, etc. Which ones do you think, if someone's listening to this, I want to become more confident, I want to become less fearful, what are some of these training techniques for hypercapnia that people should perhaps investigate?
The plastic bag breathing.
Plastic bag breathing
is the oldest one, and that was already published in 1932.
Okay.
So there's nothing new,
but
everybody forgot about it.
Why did we forget?
Yeah, because it's not. You can't. There's not one patent for it. You cannot sell it. It's really. It is too cheap.
Does it come down to that? Do you think?
I definitely know. So.
Yeah.
I don't. But now it's coming back because the audience is much more informed. I don't think it's all knowledge, but they have a lot more information. People are fed up. I think that you also know people are fed up that they have to go to 20 specialists because they have 20 different symptoms, and they are searching for not for alternatives. But I don't want to call this alternative medicine because it is not alternative medicine. It's very conventional medicine. It was only forgotten about. The moment pharma industry became important, we lost all those interventions in nature. Because believe me, our ancestors, they couldn't phone a doctor. They had to solve their problems in whatever way, and so nature has to have the answer to all our diseases. It's impossible that the answer is not there. It has to be there. Perhaps we haven't found it, but it has to be there in behavioral things, in breathing exercises. And perhaps because of not being susceptible to develop a disease, because I think that is the most important thing. So did our ancestors suffer atherosclerotic diseases? No. If you look to the Maasai today, do they have atherosclerosis? You cannot imagine. Much worse than you and I. But it is non-symptomatic atherosclerosis. It's not an atherosclerosis with inflammation. It's a stable atherosclerosis. And they don't have any problem with it. So nature has to offer all kind of solutions, and perhaps we only have to search for it, or not even search for it anymore. Perhaps it is inside our actual environment, because we can do those breathing exercise, and once in a while you can deprive yourself one day of water, because that's normal. We always have done that. The thing is, that was suffering, and we don't like to suffer.
No,
we don't like to at all. I
don't like the thought of going out without water for an hour, let alone a whole day.
But but can you imagine 24 hours without water, walking 22 miles in 30 degrees Celsius?
Yeah.
Come back, and you get a cold glass of water, or a liter of cold water. Can you imagine the feeling that produces? And can you also imagine what the reward system would do when we would engage in these kind of challenges? That glass of water is a medicine.
Yeah.
Because perhaps that is for intermittent living the most important thing people should hear. It are not the challenges that improve our health. It's the reward after it. And that's so important.
So it's not the challenge.
It's the reward.
It's the reward. Okay. So it's the coming back to normality, I was going to say, but coming back to balance, coming back from the sort of stress state to the...
But can you imagine, you haven't eaten for 18 hours and you worked out and you worked cognitively and physically. And then you yourself or your partner or the family makes a beautiful meal. And you eat that meal. And that meal is composed of everything we would need. Micronutrients, macronutrients. It looks good. It smells good. It everything, all the senses are triggered. And you haven't eaten for 18 hours. That meal is a medicine.
Yeah.
But that meal is a medicine. But it's not the 18 hours of fasting. If we look at the body when we are fasting, we are in stress. We have high cortisol, noradrenaline.
Yeah.
Said, I don't want this. Yeah. But afterwards, you activate the reward system. And so the expanded acute stress response, that's what we coined. It's not the acute stress response anymore. It's the expanded acute stress response, which involves the whole body, from the hair to the germline to your big toe. The antidote is the activation of the reward system. So if you can maintain this rhythm, it's very difficult to develop a disease.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about fasting, actually, in that respect, because you hear people talk about fasting, and I think this is really refreshing for me to hear, because most people talk about the stressed state and how that is where the medicinal effects occur. So you upregulate autophagy, you improve nutrient sensing, the calorie restriction has some benefit to it as well. Not really on the other side when you break your fast. And what I'm hearing from you, it's that point where you reach, where you satiate yourself, where you actually have food again. That's where the medicine is. And I think there's a disconnect in the way I've certainly thought about fasting and its potential benefits up to this day. And I wonder if we could dive into some of those mechanisms. Is it that dopamine reward that you get at the end? Because the way you describe it to me, it sounds like, wow, I'm going to experience this food and it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful experience, a wonderful feeling to be satiated. And that's, perhaps that's what the benefit is because of.
I'm going to give you an example of very recent research we've done. It's not published yet, but it's going to be published. And that it was already done in mice, but not in human being. Okay. So we have a whole bunch of ex-terminal cancer patients. But I'm saying ex-terminal because they are not terminal anymore. So they were cancer. And a few of them, they suffered an enormous cachexia. So they did not even have the motivation to continue living. Mm-hmm. And although we did everything to motivate them again to engage in some purpose in life, and motivate them to engage in all the things we're talking about, we didn't achieve that. And we thought, what the hell is this? Okay, and then that study in mice that was published in Science, that was very, very, very opening our mind, because they showed that the tumor itself produces a neuroinflammation. The neuroinflammation affects two very important sides of the reward system, the pallidum and the nucleus accumbens, not important. And when they are inflamed, they produce GABA, and so they produce a neuroinhibitor, and that inhibits the reward system. So that makes sense. If the tumor itself makes people surrender. So cancer only has one purpose. It wants to kill the host. And it uses even psychological mechanisms to make a cancer patient surrender. So what we did then do, that's what we did, is those the enzymes that are responsible for the KKC, they're all vitamin B dependent. So then we started give people the cancer patients very high amount of B vitamin supplements. The KKC disappeared and they started motivation again.
Really?
So then we measured in the urine dopaminergic metabolites. Before the intervention, we didn't have any dopaminergic metabolites. After the interventions, they had much more dopamine.
So just explain to the listener the dopaminergic metabolites. What was that indicative of? The fact that you found that in the urine.
Yeah, because if there are metabolites of dopamine in the urine, then you produce dopamine.
Okay.
If there are no metabolites, so the level of metabolites of dopamine is much more validated than dopamine in the blood. It doesn't say anything. You have to measure it in the urine. So it was incredibly interesting. So it is really about dopamine. But it goes one step beyond, because it's not dopamine, it is when dopamine is produced and the person that is engaging in a search and that search is successful, the dopamine is converted in endogenous morphine, which is not the same as endorphins and encapsulates. It has got nothing to do with it. Morphine is the end. What I mean literally is the end. I'm hungry and I want to find food. Okay. People think, but when you're hungry, you only have to find food. But that's not true. Hunger should be nutrient specific. We have receptors for magnesium. We have receptors for calcium, and we have receptor for zinc. We have the receptor for natrium. We have receptors for every single micronutrient. So hunger should be nutrient specific.
Okay.
So it's not true that hunger is some universal feeling people have. No, we can really have magnesium, calcium, zinc, hunger. The three of them have the same taste. They're bitter. And they are umami. So what should attract you is nutrients with umami taste. And or green. You understand?
Yeah.
Our brain and our body really knows about it. That are two receptors, which is called TRPM6 and 7, and they're used by the three micronutrients. So just suppose you have magnesium hunger. So not hunger, magnesium hunger. So you're hungry and you find magnesium-rich food. What did you do? You had to find it. So it was an effort.
Yeah.
It took time.
Yeah.
It took time. You can imagine, it took time. You had to take a little bit of risk. Yeah. And you have found the right nutrient. It's not about nutrient, the right nutrient. This is one step beyond. It's not only I deserve this. No, it's the end of the searching process. At the moment that the prefrontal cortex detect the right reward, the dopamine, which we have produced by moving, is converted by a liver enzyme. You see, a liver enzyme, which is vitamin B dependent, converted in morphine. And that moment, your brain and your immune system are at ease. The end. Those two systems responsible for the fact that we prevail, the brain and the immune system, they don't like open endings. You've written books. If you ever write a novel, never write it with an open end, because that makes people ill. We don't like open ends at all. We hate open ends. I don't know you, but
Yeah.
but the Hobbits, the
Trilogy. I
the
think.
trilogy.
Yeah.
The first one I knew it was a trilogy. The second I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I went with my kids to the cinema, thinking it would only be one movie. And when there were 5 minutes left, I said to the kids, there has to happen a lot still, because and then they said, and part one.
Yeah.
1.5 year waiting for the second. So what did I suffer? A low-grade inflammation.
Yeah.
I suffered a low-grade inflammation. My immune system
Yeah.
was really disturbed, because the brain and my immune system thought the end. No, the end.
Yeah.
So that's how people search, and that's how the reward system functions, and that is so beautiful to see. That if people we search, we always search for food, and for water, and for love, and for social interactions, etc. And if you then achieve what you're looking for, as I say, then you really have two very important mindset functions. I deserve it, and I am okay. It's not about happiness. Happiness lasts 7 seconds. It's not even optimism or positivism. No, that's not true. It's about, this is what I've been looking for, and I've achieved it.
You've done some work within the cancer field looking at purpose and meaning training.
Yes.
And I personally find that fascinating, because cancer as an umbrella term speaks to a process of which there are many different types of cancer, although you might think differently.
No, every cancer is a different type of cancer.
But teaching people purpose and meaning has a literal physical impact, in terms of the immune response. And I think that flies in the face of conventional thinking when it comes to how we deal with this.
May I ask a question to you?
Yeah.
Do you still believe in psychosomatic diseases?
Do I still believe in psychosomatic diseases?
And it's a very, very, very badly formulated question, because I already provoked you. Do you still believe?
Do I still believe
in psychosomatic diseases?
I mean, I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes.
Okay, I don't.
Okay, let's unpack that. For
psychology and physiology are the same things.
Okay,
you cannot separate them.
Okay, I mean, I certainly believe that there's that connection, but
is it not the same thing?
Let's explore that.
Behavior. Where behavior comes from. That's first physics.
Okay.
First, it's electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So I sense you. We are talking with each other. I hear you.
Yeah.
That produces an electric signal. That electric signal produces neurochemistry.
Sure.
And then that neurochemistry demands epigenetic activity of some genes. And then we get biology. And that biology is physiology and psychology at the same time. So we can think that things are psychosomatics, but in the end, everything is somatic.
So it has to have a physical endpoint, is what you're saying. It has to manifest in something.
No, it is the same thing.
Okay.
No, it has. It's not a sequence. It is the same thing.
Okay.
There is no psychology without physiology, and there is no physiology without psychology.
Okay.
It's impossible.
Okay.
It's impossible. So if how can it be that we still think that thinking has no influence on health? That is so weird that we really think that we think that thinking is something which happens out of our brain. Thinking happens in our brain. No. Spirituality is localized in a very specific part of the brain. If somebody is religious, I only have to cut one connection, and he's not religious anymore. So come on. So all those things are just human being things. Are just natural things.
Yeah.
So if we look to our brain and look at those people without a purpose in life, okay, and see what you can achieve by training the purpose of life, and then that is almost impossible. People think that's not possible, but the thing is, just measure it. Don't make it a magical thing. Measure a tumor, do a purpose in life training, and measure the tumor again. Yeah, immediately after a week and after a year, and if the purpose in life training decreases the tumor size 40%, and my next patient I do a sham intervention, nothing changes, then probably the purpose in life training has some effect, which is not some psychological thing. No, it's not true. It's also a psychological thing because it's a physiological thing. So it affects the brain. It affects the way you think. It is the way you think. It is the way you feel. It doesn't affect, one thing doesn't affect the other thing. It is the same thing. You cannot have psychology without physiology. So you cannot have a mental disorder without pathology. You understand?
I completely understand. I think my mind is still in that sort of Descartesian or Cartesian way of thinking, of having them separated. And I think I've got to a point where I believe that there's a communication between them, but they're still separate. So your mindset can impact your physiology, and your physiology can affect your mindset, but they're not necessarily the same thing. But your thinking is very much that they are an entire unit. They exist not in separate entities, but they are very much the same thing.
It is the same thing.
Okay,
they're not separable.
I'm on my way. And so, training purpose of life. How do we do that?
First of all, there are scientific questionnaires for them. And why don't you use science? Because the system demands science. So I use the scientific questionnaires, which are very well validated, etc. So that's how I start. Okay, and then people really come out and they really don't know why they should live. That what really comes out. There's nothing challenging them. Perhaps, but they can even have children. So what if you look at longevity and purpose in life, that it is not if you look again to the blue zones, which is not a good example for us because we don't live in the blue zones.
Sure,
that's not reality. That is something virtual for ours. But we also have people who become 100 years in a healthy state. Very interesting. They all are engaged in family things. They take care of themselves. They take care of the kids. They take care of the tribe. That is the first part of purpose in life. You don't have to win the Nobel Prize to have a purpose in life. Take care of your family. So that's one. The majority of people suffering from cancer, they feel so lonely. They feel so bloody lonely. And loneliness is so toxic. That's a disease. And it is, today it is considered a disease. And so that's the opposite of a purpose in life. Being lonely and feeling lonely. Being lonely, not feeling lonely. That's the good word for it. So how do you train it? First of all, explaining doing something we called interactive neuropsychological education, is with the patient start to decipher visually, auditively, cognitively, but also emotionally, where does cancer come from? What is it? What entity is it? And the first of all, getting rid of deterministic genetic thinking. Because if we make it some genetic thing, then people they say, I can't do anything about it. Yeah. And if you can't, so why should I do something with the purpose in life? So first we give them knowledge, not information. We show them that cancer, first of all, is a disease with a purpose, which is in the beginning quite frightening.
Yeah.
For shit, a purpose. Yeah. It wants to kill you. There's not any other purpose in cancer. It wants to kill the host. But why cancer wants to kill me? Let's find that out. Okay, and then there are several medical hypotheses for them, of which a few lack evidence, but another few have huge evidence. And perhaps the most validated hypothesis is purpose in life. So and then people start saying, okay, yeah. So why would somebody who just had a kid, get cancer? Women postnatally, and they develop breast cancer. What is the weirdest thing? You probably think that is weird. I don't know if it's weird, because if we perhaps investigate the oocytes that are left, because that's also evidence, then we could find in the oocytes possibly some deleterious damage done, that it's better that that woman would not reproduce herself again.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
For that there is evidence. And we tell that to patients. Well, no, but your oocytes, they can improve. They are influenceable. And it's incredible. Oocytes, like the placenta and the spermatozoids, are the three organs that are the most sensitive to nutritional supplements. That's incredible. Placenta treatment is a supplemental thing. And we exactly know what it needs. Yeah? And spermatozoids and oocytes also. So it's influenceable. That is not some deterministic thing. No. You can control it. One. Second one, why do you live? Why? People say, because I have to work. And tomorrow, because I have to work. And the day after tomorrow, because I have to work. So you call that a trivial purpose in life. So what else? And people really cannot even define it. From the moment the grammar comes out, I talk about talking, and the sentences become longer, and the word choice becomes wider, the immune system starts to function different. I don't know if you know, this is the most advanced studies in psychiatry is about speech interpretation.
Speech interpretation.
Yeah, so you can really you can predict a depressive person
just from
short sentences, very low word number. People come out of the depression, the story becomes longer, the sentences become longer, and the word choice is longer, with an incredible susceptibility. So we want the people to tell and to make and to tell and describe their future in a narrative way. And that is part of the intervention. Okay.
It sounds a bit like visualization, manifesting,
Yeah.
really trying to paint a vivid picture of your life, your meaning, your purpose, your surroundings.
When you're healthy.
Yeah.
Just describe, cancer is gone, how would your life look like?
Yeah.
That's called solution focused brief therapy.
Okay.
It's incredibly effective.
Uh-huh.
As the highest, NNM, so the minimal number of patients to treat,
Uh-huh.
for instance, in amenorrhea,
Yeah. So
Is-
absence of periods.
is solution focused brief therapy.
Huh.
Not hormones. No. Just do as if you have your menstruation.
Really?
Just do as if you have it.
Yeah.
Just live a life as if you're having it. So you're buying tampons, you're using tampons. You do as if you have ovulation moment with everything. Do as if, and the hypothalamus listens to you.
Like, as a conventionally trained medic, and as medics going to be listening to this and stuff, it just sounds so far out of
Yeah,
it's
out of your physiology.
It's exactly
Because you still separate psychology from physiology. That's the problem. So if you don't visualize what I'm saying in your brain, but if you listen to it as if it's out of the brain, then I understand you. Obviously. I definitely know that you know the research of Bernard Spiegel. In 1989, he was the first who published in women with terminal breast cancer purpose in life training.
Okay.
He showed that the women, it was a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. And he showed that the women who did purpose in life training lived 19 up to 57 months longer than the control group. That was incredible. That was 1989.
Wow.
But the world was not mature for it. They started to attack him from all sides.
Yeah.
He worked in Harvard University, and they threw him out. They said, "You're a charlatan."
Wow.
But you know what the good thing was? He took his box, you're an American guy, and he walked straight over, to where? To Cambridge. They wanted him. They wanted him. Yeah. And that was the first study in which purpose in life training was shown to have an incredible impact in life expectancy in women with terminal breast cancer. But we didn't understand it. I was in that time, I'm now 38, so I'm 39 now. I'm a little bit older. But in
a couple of years younger than me.
In 89, I was teaching clinical psychoneuroimmunology for 1 year, only for 1 year. And for me also, it was fascinating, but the world was not mature for it. Everybody was against us. Because it was not understandable, and it was true. You know why? There were no machines to validate what we said.
Sure.
So we didn't have proof for it.
Yeah.
In 2025, that's not done anymore. When you give me your brain, and we can do that in human beings, we can really do that. And then with genetic stimulation of the ventral tegmentum, which is the most important part of the reward system, and we stimulate some dopaminergic neurons in that part of the brain, and you have suffered a heart attack yesterday. By stimulating those neurons, your heart is going to be repaired.
How?
Through an immune response, which is incredible. Because if the heart suffers an infarct, then by an axon, not by humoral substances, it directly goes into the brain, in the ventral tegmentum. But what is incredible, the efference, so the way back is not to the heart. The way back is to the liver. So the heart informs the brain of a myocardial infarct. The brain stimulates the liver, in which noradrenaline, stress hormone, is decreased, not increased, decreased. The liver produces a molecule which is called C3 of the immune system, and that protein increases blood flow, inhibits pro-inflammatory responses, and improves heart function. But if you then look, first you do that in mice because you would love to have voluntary human beings, but you can't find them. But then post-mortem, it has been investigated that people who suffer a depression before the heart attack, they have fibrotic heart. People who have a rich life before the heart attack, hardly any damage to the heart. And that's human research, not mice.
Yeah.
And this is not, once again, it's not about optimism. It's not even about positivism. It's about deserving health.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about some of these intermittent living, because I feel like I could talk about purpose of life and purpose of life training for the rest of the show, because it sounds like that's the most important intervention regardless of people's situation. But what about some of the more fashionable exposures that people are leaning into? So heat exposure, cold exposure.
You probably have heard about the Iceman from Holland, Wim Hof.
Yeah.
Extreme cold.
Yeah.
I don't like that at all.
Oh, you don't like it? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I like moderate, prolonged cold.
Interesting.
Much more.
Okay, so instead of cold plunging, you're more of taking your coat off?
Cold environment.
Cold environment, okay.
4 hours.
Okay.
4 hours in an environment of 14 to 16 degrees Celsius with short trousers. Short trousers. That demands something which has got nothing to do with extreme cold.
Okay.
Yeah. First, extreme cold. Not everybody is capable of adapting to that. Wim Hof, I know Wim Hof quite well. Wim Hof started to engage in this extreme thing because his wife died. You probably know his story. I don't know. He had 4 little kids, and he was suffering, and he didn't want to live anymore. But then he found that if he started to do extreme things, you see, if you want to die, or you have fear of death, then do something risky. He started to do very risky things. Swimming under the ice of the North Pole, 1 kilometer. You have to be crazy. Yeah. But then he wanted to live again. So so it was very extreme, and not bad because it has shown that hormetic triggers are important. But we did this already 10 years earlier. But we did it in nature. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about intermittent living as a purpose in life. Intermittent living as a purpose in life.
Yeah.
And it's about combinations. And so if you ask me, Leo, do you believe in cold as a anti-cancer treatment? I would say as a part of, but never ever isolated.
Okay.
Because if you want to achieve something, we have to be aware of one of the most important characteristics of every organism, and that is every cell can protect itself against toxins.
Okay.
Every cell. So if you look at cancer treatment, chemotherapy, if you see how fast a tumor develops resistance, it's incredible. For those incredible toxic substances, cisplatin and taxotere. If you see in nature what those substances do, they kill animals immediately. So they almost kill human beings. But although the human being is almost killed, the tumor develops resistance. That is a characteristic of every cell. So if you use natural toxicity, because cold is toxic and heat is toxic, you have to be aware of the fact it is all toxic. Yeah? It is not nice. It increases in the beginning your inflammatory biomarkers. Doesn't decrease, it increases. It is toxic. It is really toxic. But the toxicity is very, very necessary. But you should never, ever become resistant. Because if you're resistant, the intervention becomes deleterious.
Okay.
So you cannot engage, for instance, in intermittent fasting every day. You know why our ancestors, you know what they died from? From chronic intermittent fasting.
So famine.
Yeah, they starved.
Yeah.
You should not starve people. You should do intermittent fasting once in a while, not every day, not 7 days a week. Yeah, that is not what intermittent fasting is for. It's the search for something which is called flexibility.
Yeah.
And even more important, anti-fragility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's more than tolerance, that's more than resilience. Anti-fragility is innovation. I'm going to talk about the word innovation because I already used a sentence which is called turbo-adaptive capacities. That's what I'm talking about. That's anti-fragility. Innovative, new mechanisms. And that's what I'm going to explain afterwards. So if you only use cold, and you always use cold, then we become cold resistant. That's a pity. But if you combine cold with, for instance, hypoxia exercises and water deprivation, it becomes very difficult to develop resistance to 3 or 4 toxic triggers. The only thing you have to do is be aware of the doses. Don't make it too much, and don't do it every day.
This is literally what I just wrote down here in capital letters: dose.
Yeah.
Because everything, and you mentioned this word hormesis that we'll get back to in a second, but everything has to be in the context of dose.
Always.
Right? So just like you articulated earlier, people will die from excessive intermittent fasting, i.e.
Of course.
starvation.
Of course.
People could die of excessive hypercapnia,
of course.
i.e. breath holding. So when someone is listening to this and they're thinking intermittent living sounds like a lifestyle that I'd like to entertain, we have to really think about dose and how we actually personalize it for the individual. And herein lies, I guess, quite a difficult...
And always make a difference between prevention, protection, and curation.
Gotcha.
Because that are 3 completely different things.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you, explain what I do at this moment. We have a whole group of cancer patients. Okay, terminal, and they come to us, which is a pity that they are terminal, but it's okay. I'm going to use one of the girls because she wants to be famous, and that's why I can use her name. I can use everything. Okay. So this is a woman, 42 years old, and 2 kids. And last August, she contacted us. No, a friend of... It's a nice story. The story is a good story.
Yeah, go for it.
So her best friend phoned me, and he's a friend of mine, that my best friend, Hanneke, has terminal cancer with a primary tumor in the breast, with 23 bone metastases, with a few lung metastases. There's no treatment. Can you do something? And I didn't have time. And my wife, Fanny, says to me, no, it's not about you having time. You're going to do it. 42 years old, 2 kids, she can't die. Do whatever. You find time, you're going to treat her. So I didn't have a choice.
Okay.
My wife is in charge.
Okay.
So she came, and it was, I really had my doubts. And I told her, I really don't know if we are able to achieve something. I don't know. And she said, doesn't matter, but I don't want to die. She said, no, you know, let's do it. We'll see what happens. I don't know. So I said, what's your purpose in life? That was the first step.
First
always.
question, yeah.
She said, you have 2 kids, yeah, but if I die or not, my husband is there. He's a fantastic father. Yeah, they don't really need me. So she was really in a buckle, in a vicious circle. She didn't have the job she wanted to have. Okay, and I said, that's the first thing we have to change. And she gave her job away, and she started to do what she always wanted to do, being drawing pictures for children books. And she started doing that. And they could economically, but now she's earning quite a bit of money with it, so very nice. And so I said, we're going to do 11 interventions. So I said, we're going to do prolonged moderate cold, 4 hours. And she said, but I want, with everything you do, I want at least 1 paper.
Okay.
I love that. I love that. So I gave this is cold therapy. Look, this done in a woman, 18 years old, 6 hours a day, 16 degrees Celsius, non-Hodgkin cancer, a completely isolated intervention. See what happens. 14 days later, the tumor was gone.
Okay.
Only cold. But they stopped, and the tumor came back. So I said, we are not going to stop.
Okay.
Because I don't know what's going to happen. If we stop, perhaps the tumors come back. That's one.
Okay. So you gave her a case study.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a case study.
Okay.
I said, then we're going to use whole body hypothermia. Because you're going to do 5 days a week cold therapy. That's immune suppressive. So we need at the same time an immune stimulative effect. That's going to be whole body hypothermia in infrared sauna.
Okay.
How many papers do you want? She said, at least 1. I gave her 100.
Okay.
Yeah. We were the first one in 2011 investigating whole body hypothermia in cancer and depression. So it was very good work. It was a master study of a student of mine.
Okay.
Next one. Then
what's the difference? Sorry, what's the difference between infrared sauna and sort of Finnish or Swedish sauna?
Different.
Very, very different.
Very different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The infrared sauna is direct radiation on the skin, whereas the Finnish sauna is indirect heat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's warm,
right? Yeah.
But it's not warm.
Okay.
Yeah, so the difference is huge.
Okay.
The mechanism is different.
Okay.
It's really different.
All right.
That's the second one. Third one, between 11 in the morning and 4 o'clock, that's the cold period. You can't eat anything. I said, why? I said, because that's the dead zone of the immune system. That's where the primary tumor grows. And it can't be nourished at that time. Ooh. So if at 11 you have to be in a fasting state, at 8 o'clock is your first meal, and then till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's no food. Ooh. And then you have to be in a ketogenic state, but not a ketogenic diet.
Okay.
Very important.
Very
The
different.
difference
Yeah.
is huge.
Okay.
Ketogenic state. Papers, he said, I gave her 10 papers.
Sure.
Okay? 3. And then we came to the most important intervention which we should investigate much more in cancer. There's only one animal in the whole world, only one animal that can't develop cancer. Do you know that animal?
I'm
It's
assuming
the
it's a
naked
rodent.
mole rat.
Okay, a rat.
It's a
okay,
rat.
yeah, okay.
It is the most horrible rat you can imagine. It is really very ugly. It's horrible. If you have to search it up.
Okay, yeah.
It's
We'll have to put that on
incredible.
YouTube. Okay.
But it
The naked
can't.
mole rat.
The naked mole rat, but it can't develop cancer. It's impossible.
Oh my god. Yeah,
Impossible.
that's terrible. That's
Terrible, eh? It's really terrible.
that is super scary.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
Gosh.
But it becomes 30 years.
30 years.
30, yes. A rat.
Wow.
No aging, no cancer.
Wow. Okay.
And it has a thing which not even plants have. And that is called early cell contact inhibition. And the word early is very important. Look, you have to look at it like this. If there is a tissue in which cells proliferate, then at the moment they touch each other, they should stop dividing. Okay? So although it's weird, every tissue in our body, every tissue in whatever body, even in a plant, is made up in layers. So it's one layer, then the other layer, it will never grow like this. It can only grow in horizontal. So one layer, boop, next layer, boop, next layer. That's how everything is built up. And that rat. So we also have cell contact inhibition, but we don't have early cell contact inhibition. So those animals, if there's only a little bit of contact, the cells stop proliferation.
Right.
So that is very important for leukemia, for every single proliferative disease. And there's one molecule they have, and we don't. And the gene, the molecule is an IN kinase. It's produced by a gene which is called P16. We don't have it. There's not one animal who has it. But can you imagine why if you think in an evolutionary way, why cancer has to have a purpose?
Yeah.
Because it's only one bloody gene. And so the evolution only had to give that gene to every plant, and nobody ever would have developed cancer. No, only one animal. And there's not one other animal with that capacity. We have cell contact inhibition.
Okay.
So we have a molecule, a similar molecule, not the same, also a kinase produced by P27. But we also have the opposite. So we have a counter molecule against cell contact inhibition, which is called YAP kinase. Doesn't matter. Those words are not important. So to really treat cancer, we would search for a P16 effect. So what we do is we stimulate P27 and we inhibit YAP kinase, and that's possible.
Yeah. So just for the listener, you're suppressing one gene in your
you epigenetically stimulate one, and silence another one.
Yeah.
And obviously, what we did is search for activators and inhibitors in nature, because they have to be available in nature. Very interesting.
Yeah.
That P727 is activated by resveratrol. And if the doses is high enough, it is evidenced.
Okay.
And the YAP kinase is inhibited by a thing which is called inulalinium.
Inulilinium.
Elenium. That's a plant.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds like a prebiotic, like a fiber.
Yeah, but a plant.
Okay.
So the next thing we did, because that's how I always think, if they are effective, then their origin has to be Africa or Eurasia,
Okay.
because they're where we come from. That's what I did. So where does inulilinium grows? It's native in Africa and native in India.
Okay.
So it has to work because that's where we come from. Yeah. So that is what we used with her, and we used that isolated for 2 weeks, because I wanted to know, without the cold, without the heat, without what would be the effect.
Okay.
It was controlled for by the oncologist. Okay, it was incredible. It was incredible. The 23 bone tumors, 11 sclerotized in 2 weeks' time.
Gosh.
That was incredible. I have all the PET scans and
Sure.
the CT scans.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to publish this.
Sure.
It has to be published. So we thought, wow, this really works. It's a case. It's NS1.
Sure.
I know it's NS1.
Sure,
I know how science. I'm a scientist. I know how it works. But it was fascinating. Okay. Anyway, we're now in June. She's cancer-free, but she's not improved. She's cancer-free. Even the oncologist says, "You're cancer-free." And I don't understand it, but you're cancer-free. Yeah. And she says, yes. And she says, and the world has to know. And you know what she said to the oncologist? But believe me, I deserve it. And the oncologist said, why? Because you don't know the effort I'm doing. So I'm 4 hours in the cold.
Yeah.
I do hypothermia.
Yeah.
I don't eat. I don't drink.
Yeah.
I have to supplement. I eat incredibly nice, but it's expensive. I really deserve it.
Yeah.
And the oncologist says, wow, I think you really deserve it. Yeah. So it's hard work.
It is, yeah.
It's hard work. It's not for free.
No. And on that, I mean, this discussion, and I'm glad you mentioned this case study, came about as a result of the question around dose.
Yes.
So really personalizing that dose that's where the effort has to be.
Yes. And so 4 hours in the cold.
Yeah.
But now, a year later, she said, when do we stop? I said, I don't know. I don't know. I think, but let's do logical scientific reasoning. And scientific reasoning is based on your new homeostatic state is memorized in your brain. Don't worry about it. The only thing we have to know what is the timeline to produce that memory forever. And this is something I've been studying for the last 20 years. Immune responses with a neurological memory. Obviously, that had to exist. And the group of Asaya Rose from Israel, they're incredible. Asaya Rose and Elizabeth Coren, she is the PhD doctorate, and they really found the immunogram. So really the neurological memory of immune responses. Okay, so and it is logical that there should be such a memory, but we never could localize it. But now it's localized. It's beautiful. The studies and that happens always. That at three sites, 3 locations in the world, the same thing comes out. We, Asai Rose, and a guy who's called Ristov. Incredible. So normally if you're jealous, you said I was the first one, no, but it's not true. This you call this synchronization,
Sure.
and that exists.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said to her, what we've done, is if we've created a new immunological homeostatic state. That is the immune state, which is anti-cancer. That has to be memorized. So if in the future there is a new tumor cell coming out, we should not be afraid at all, because the neuroimmunological state has been memorized. But I said, it can only be memorized when the interventions we've done are known by nature. This is so important what I'm telling. If you look at chemotherapy, if you look at immune therapy in cancer, but also in immune suppressive treatment in people suffering from so-called autoimmune diseases, if you measure the memory of those reactions, doesn't exist. And so you have to take a mouse. You want to do it in humans, but you can't. You produce a disease, okay, a colitis, and then you trace by a tracer in which part of the brain the immune response is sensed. And then you find a whole bunch of neurological parts of the brain, and then it ends up in the insular cortex, in one part of the brain. It ends up, and there you see a few neurons that are activated by axonal activity. Afterwards, what you just do is let the mouse recover, and then by genetic activation of those neurons in which you suppose that immune response has been memorized, you trigger those cells, and what happens? Exactly the same, not different.
Okay.
Exactly the same inflammatory response, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So without any cause, only by triggering brain activity. Exactly the same inflammatory response in the gut. What does it mean? It means a very positive thing. Everything is everywhere at the same time. That's good. But also it means that negative things can be memorized related with a inflammatory response. So just think of this. You call this the law of Hebb. Okay? When two neurons fire together, they wire together, and if they don't, they won't. If we look at that insular cortex, and now I think that I'm going to seduce you. I think that what I'm going to explain now, that you stop believing in psychosomatic things.
Okay.
Almost for sure.
Okay.
Yeah? In that part of the brain, emotions, thoughts, social interaction, sexual events, interoception, and immunoception come together. So we are sitting here.
Yeah.
At this moment, we look at each other, we listen to each other, we sit on a chair, we are with two other persons, there is light. Okay? This is one big event. And when we finish, I am not going to do anything for 1 hour. I'm not even going to look at my telephone, because after this event, if I want to remember it, I have to do nothing.
Okay.
You call that nothinging. If I do nothing, I will remember this whole thing with every detail you can imagine. Because then, in my insular cortex, emotion, thoughts, this room, the way I'm sitting is literally synchronized. But that's only happening when you do nothing. If afterwards I get my phone and I'm not sensorically deprivated, there is no synchronization. But if it's synchronized, then it is nice, and we have a good feeling, and we're finished today. It was, this was good. This is how it should be.
Yeah.
Okay, then it has a direct effect on the way my immune system would kill a cancer cell. My immune system then is at this moment also available, is part of this experience. There is continuous communication between the brain, the immune system, and vice versa. So if we are okay here and we feel good and we finished and we said, wow, now we deserve a glass of wine. We deserve because we did our far most best.
Yeah.
This is all memorized in a neuroimmunological memory. That means I only have to think about this
Yeah.
in the future. I get exactly the same immune response.
Gotcha.
This is fantastic, but it can also be very, very deleterious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
the-
Depending on what experience you're
So,
remembering.
physiology and psychology. I go to an oncologist. I hope I don't have cancer. The outcome of the study, I have cancer. Okay. Only the diagnosis is killing a human being. We are not made to know such things because it has a direct influence on the prognosis of that disease. Yeah? So just by, you call that cosification, because we are, if you say somebody has rheumatoid arthritis, you're a doctor. So just suppose the following thing: who do you want as a patient? Somebody with 2 inflamed knees, red and painful, or a patient with a diagnosis rheumatoid arthritis? I want the first one. You know why? That's easy to solve. Rheumatoid arthritis, they say there is no cure. Come on, of course. We made a thing out of it. The diagnosis itself is prognostically a very deleterious thing.
Yeah.
Because words, emotions, interoception, and the immune system, they converge in the same part of the brain. And by repeating only the same bloody symptoms or the diagnosis, you reactivate literally the immune system that maintains the rheumatoid arthritis activity. So, but the opposite is also true. It can also be very positive.
Yeah.
It can be very positive when I understand things. When people would understand that autoimmune system they do not exist. That's a good thing. That you're not attacking yourself. So what I'm doing, your immune system is just doing what it's made for, because you think you have the disease you have is called Hashimoto, morbus Hashimoto, and you have antibodies against 2 molecules. But if I look at those molecules under a microscope, they're not human. Their structure has been changed. And you know why? Because look, you see that molecule. So here is that thyroglobulin, and here is a molecule which is called NOI5GC. That's a sugar from red meat, and that sugar is now adhering to a molecule of yourself, and your immune system is attacking that molecule. But we can't measure antibodies against that. We measure antibodies against those proteins of you. So it's not me I'm attacking. No. So if we can rid of that NOI5GC, then Hashimoto goes away. Yes. But is my thyroid gland regenerable? And then you only need a few patients with before and after an ultrasound, and I have those patients like, look, this is 1.5 years ago, this is now, the thyroid gland is regenerable. And the people say, how come? Yeah, do you know how many stem cells there are in that niche? Yeah. And how many cells are waiting to be developed in normal thing. So I come back. The memory
Yeah.
of immunology
Mm-hmm.
in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why it has to have a natural background, and why the new medicines don't produce a memory, because that is what I said with her.
Yeah.
All the interventions, if they work, they have to have a natural background, because studies with rapamycin, probably
Yeah.
used in autoimmune diseases, you can completely, literally produce a complete remission of colitis or another autoimmune disease with rapamycin, and not even with high dosage. Then what you do is in the cortex insularis, in the insular cortex, see if that new homeostatic state is sensed. It is sensed. If it's sensed and then memorized, I can reactivate it. And if that's true, I can take the rapamycin away,
Yeah.
because now my brain already knows. Forget it. Every single medicine we developed in the last 100 years is not memorized. Not memorized. And makes sense. It's too new. We are not able yet to visualize or to create a picture, a mechanism related with new conventional medicines. So oncologists, they're right. They say cancer with the treatments we have is not curable. We can only talk about partial or complete remission, but the cancer probably will come back. They're right, because the treatment options are not natural, so they are not memorized. So why do we are we what we are doing is really, we call that drug-free oncology, which is not drug-free, but because for me a supplement is also a drug. I don't make a difference. The only thing is, one is patentable, the other isn't. But it is medicine. But anyway, you can imagine that inulialinium, that has to work because it is a plant. So she asked, and it is something, if you look back in anthropological data, it has been used for thousands of years. So probably, I don't know for sure, the insular cortex knows about it. But it definitely knows about cold. And it definitely knows about heat. And it definitely knows about hypoxia and hypercapnia. It definitely knows about danger, because that I don't know if it knows about all plants, but it definitely knows it knows about fasting. The eldest therapy against diabetes type 1, long time fasting.
Yeah.
1925.
Yeah.
There was no insulin. So how did we save people? Stop eating.
Yeah.
Definitely known as a medicine.
Yeah.
There's, if somebody wants to discuss it, let us, but I don't, it is impossible that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It has to work.
I definitely take your sentiment. I think this feels like a re-education for me, in the way I think about medicine and the use of chemicals. And I my opinion is, I think they have utility, particularly in a world where access or knowledge, I know you've made the distinction between information and knowledge, but this is quite hard to separate. But I think when it comes to intermittent living, my interest really lies in that preventative aspect. So you made the distinction between prevention and
Protection.
protection and curation. If someone is listening to this and they really enjoy and understand this idea of living according to our evolutionary lens or our evolutionary mechanisms, what do you think are some of the things that they should be doing on a weekly basis that perhaps have less of a dose requirement that is specific to certain conditions?
May I first just say something about what you said about conventional medicine?
Sure.
I am very pro conventional medicine in acute medicine.
Sure.
Acute medicine, we have progressed incredibly. If surgery, operations, acute antibiotic use, it's incredible how many people are saved by that. I'm not talking about acute medicine, although acute medicine could also be much more natural, definitely. Sure. I'm talking about chronic medicine, in which we have to develop new dogmas, because the old dogmas they don't fit anymore. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, preventive intermittent living. Engage a few days a week, not necessarily every day. A few days a week, 2 days, a few in English is 2, but once in a while a few is 3. Yeah. And use a cold and a hot day.
Okay.
Don't mix them. Okay. So don't take a sauna and a cold shower.
Oh, because that's really popular these days.
Yeah, but that's comfortable.
Huh.
No, use cold and warm yourself up
Naturally.
And what is the real effect? Your own body upwarming period.
Yeah.
Which the best thing would be cold bath, and then a cold period, and then skin to skin contact. Can you imagine if people freeze high in the mountain, and the only way to save people with hypothermia is naked skin to skin contact. Yeah. And it's very interesting, because that is much more than heat. People don't understand. Do you understand what happens there?
No, I mean, I can understand that there is an emotional connection and a bonding that is experienced with that skin to skin in the same way. You know, I had that recent experience with my own son, and so did my wife 8 months ago. But
but there's happening something, and that is an incredible communication with biophotons. And that produces a substance which is called L-acetyltyrosine in the skin. And that substance migrates to mitochondria in brown fat, in brown adipose tissue, and induces the production of heat. So it's much more than oxytocin and skin-to-skin contact. It is really biochemically explainable what's happening there. That would be the best thing. A cold bath.
Just as an aside story for that, one of my good friends who's a fertility specialist, she unfortunately had a scenario where her newborn had very low APGAR scores, eventually ended up going to NICU. But there's research looking at how before the baby is taken away to NICU, if there is some skin to skin with the mother who's just delivered, they have far better prognoses. And
kangaroo care.
The midwife was very aware of this, gave the baby, even with low APGAR scores, to mum for 30, 60 seconds, and then took her to NICU. And it's interesting and wonderful to even hypothesize about the potential mechanisms of that as well, because you're right, it can't just be explained through oxytocin.
No. It is really biology.
Yeah.
And psychology.
Yeah.
because it's the same thing. Yeah.
So yeah, warming up
Yeah,
naturally.
so
after it's
natural
cold.
warming up but with exercise or skin to skin contact. That if you do not have time to really do moderate, longer cold exposure,
Sure.
just do the following things. Take a cold shower for 30 seconds. Yeah, not even necessarily more.
Sure.
But don't end up with a hot shower.
Okay.
30 seconds. Yeah, and train that up to 60 and then to 90 seconds.
Uh-huh.
After that, don't dry yourself up. No, move, exercise. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so then that reward is important. Take a hot tea. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hot tea.
So external heat, the reward is internal cold.
Okay.
External cold, the reward is internal heat.
Okay.
Okay, a nice cup of hot tea, that's the reward, or a nice glass of very ice cold water, that's a reward. Okay, search for that reward. Make suffering something nice. That you say, okay, I'm doing that, but I get a reward. I deserve that. Okay, then in the cold, what you do is you do food fasting, not water fasting. Yeah. Food heats up. So if you're cold and you don't have food, heating up is going to be difficult. Yeah? So the intermittent fasting period of 16 to 18 hours belongs to the cold day.
Okay.
Yeah? The hot day, it's water fasting. Yeah? So you eat something in the morning and you drink there, and you don't eat and drink anything else till the last meal. That can be a daytime fasting. In summer, that would be 14 hours because you have the first meal at sunrise and you have the last meal at sunset. And in those 2 moments you drink. And in between there is a hot moment. A hot moment, the best thing would be a sauna. It doesn't matter infrared or but hot.
Yeah.
And the best heat is passive and active heat. Not only passive heat, sauna, the best thing would be exercise in a sauna. Or do hot boxing.
Hot boxing.
Hot box, that's incredible. Half an hour hot boxing, that is
wow.
so incredible preventive.
That
That's
sounds
fantastic.
intense. Yeah.
Hot boxing in 40 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, gosh.
But it's fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah? Hot and the passive and active sweating is one of the most effective ways to protect ourselves against the most deleterious factor of modern life, and that is pollution. That's the worst.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing of everything. It's not the majority of depressions and mental diseases has got nothing to do with father and mother. Psychoanalysis is bankrupt. Yeah? Everybody is in psychoanalysis and more depressions because pollution is the worst thing for our brain.
Huh.
So we have to get rid of the pollution. Hot, so that's heat. Passive and active sweating. Arsenicum goes out by active sweating. Aluminium by passive sweating. Different biotransformation. So that day, it's about dry fasting plus heat, and if possible, a high intensity training. Half an hour heat boxing. The cold days is aerobic training. So not intense. Make a nice walk in the woods, in the forest for 1.5 hours. Okay, so we already have 3 interventions at the same time. The 4th makes it innovative. Okay, the cold day you combine that with a hypocapnia training.
Okay.
You can do that by hyperventilation. You
Yeah.
you do that.
Yeah. For how long?
30 repetitions.
Okay.
And then you expire, and you hold your breath. Okay. When you have to when you are out of breath,
Yeah.
you inspire once and you hold your breath.
Okay.
You do it for 5 minutes. That's it.
Okay, just back and forth.
Back and forth.
Okay.
And you repeat it again and again and again till 5 minutes are finished.
Huh.
Twice a day.
Twice a day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day. No. The cold day.
Oh, the cold day. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the heat, the hot day, you do that with hypercapnia, with a plastic bag.
Okay.
Once a day, 20 minutes. Okay, it's all preventive. Then you have 2 days. I definitely know that people, if they start engaging in this, they're going to feel much better, and they say, "I'm going to do it more often." That's good. Then increase. Look, high intensity exercise with hypercapnia and heat is less suffering, but more intense because of the high intensity training. Okay, so if you want to increase the number of days, what you do, first you do 2 cold days and 1 hot, and then if you want, you do 2 cold and 2 hot days. Okay, that would be perfect. 4 triggers, they are combined and they have exactly the same background. The cold days, the pH in the blood goes up. It's an alkalinizing day. The hot day, the pH in the blood goes down. All the 4 interventions decrease the pH. So, and that difference in alkalinization and acidification, that's the hormetic trigger.
Okay.
And then the cold day, you have the best meal at night you can imagine. Yeah. And the hot day, you drink you can, even if you want, have a very cold beer.
Yeah.
Because believe me, that doesn't matter there anymore.
Yeah.
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 And combine this obviously with nutrition for human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. I just as you were talking about hormesis there, which is this consumption of mildly toxic ingredients or mildly toxic interventions, which was what we've been talking about, and how that elicits a resilience response. I was just constantly thinking about my recent trip to Snowdon, which is like a mountain up in Wales. And on the way back, all I could think about was having a pint of Guinness at the pub. And it was like, I can remember that pint very vividly. And the stress and the cold and the rain, and we did it in like late October. But the whole time you were talking about the reward as the medicine. I can visualize that and I can feel that, and I have that memory of that as well. So, this stuff works, and I think people need to find what their triggers are, what the interventions are that would be most appropriate for them, how much fear they actually want to endure, because everything is a choice here. But the one thing I think is really important is that purpose of life training. For me, I think that's the sort of area within medicine in particular that gets kind of brushed over. And from everything that I've heard from you today, as we bring this conversation to a close, has really made me reflect on that a lot more as a true medicine. So that's the one thing that I would take personally from this, and I think the listeners will probably get that as well. This is great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom about stressors to combat our comforting lives and why this is so important for us.
Can I add a small thing? I think that the conversation was very good. But I think also for the audience, I think it's a good thing to know that there are two things for human being that should be considered the most important things to maintain health or to recover health and achieve longevity. Those two things are based on control and social support. People need control. That's what I talk about, our weird reward system.
Yeah.
We need control. And medicine has become very passive. And we're not in control anymore. We gave responsibility away to the medical doctor, to the physiotherapist, and also the health officers are talking like, I cured somebody. Nobody cures anybody. Nobody cures anybody. If the soma itself cures itself, and that's why placebo functions. It's incredible if you just think about it, that the placebo treatment can cure people completely. So that means that they've cured themselves. It was only about something the immune system had to make a decision. And that decision was, can you imagine with all the unknown risk factors in culture? If you look at the immune system, our immune system can easily detect pathogens. It can easily detect damage. That is not difficult. It is not even the immune system detecting that. It's the nervous system that detects that firstly. And secondly, the immune system. But the same receptors which we use for pathogen sensing and damage sensing are used for nanoparticles. So you can imagine how weird. The immune system senses a nanoparticle and it thinks it's a bacteria. And it starts to attack. So you can imagine that we are not in charge anymore. Our poor immune system senses things that have never, ever been part of our life.
Yeah.
So what do we have to do with that? I can't eliminate pollution. You can't either. There are so many things which are not influenceable. So and perhaps that's the most important thing. Make people anti-fragile. And anti-fragility, and that's what I said 3 times, starts with innovative mechanisms. So I'm now going to tell you, I think the most important thing in medicine, which we all should know. The organism is in charge. The blueprint of life are we. We determine our own evolution. That's not a gene, because a gene does not have agency and it hasn't a purpose. We have agency and we have a purpose. So as I said, why not use our brain in our benefit? And how can we be anti-fragile? Just go back, just go a little bit back to the future. So use those challenges that made us anti-fragile to vaccinate us against all those things that are not influenceable in modern life. And just do the following thing. Let's develop new proteins. I don't know if you know, but those 4 interventions, they induce the production of proteins we've never seen. We have seen in our microscope proteins without a name after intermittent living because they're not known. That's innovation. And that is something, that's the only way to adapt to a world which will never change anymore. So make yourself strong. enough.
Mm.
I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you so much, Leo. That was wonderful. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you.
If you loved that episode, you will love the full library of podcasts from the Doctor's Kitchen Library. We talk about everything from inflammation, supplements, and food as medicine. Just like this episode right here. You can click it right now and check it out.